gonna be a fun one. We've got my boy Paul Spohr.
Hello.
We got my boy Scott White. But we got my Brooklyn boy, John Legasa.
Yes, Nick, what's up? Where's your hair? I hope you donated it.
Look, I had to look right for PitchCon. If you remember the first year, I wasn't able to look good for PitchCon. I had my head shaved. And now I'm able to actually be presentable.
So, well, you look awesome, but don't tell us that you don't draw power from that hair. Don't even try that on us.
I'm not Samson. I'm not Adrian Sampson, but I'm gonna let you guys do this.
It's unproven. It's unproven. Erroneous.
I'm stoked for this, of course, and I'm happy to just kind of sit back and hear your thoughts about starting pitchers. Take it away, guys.
Thank you so much, Nick. So we're going to be talking some pitcher targets, and I'm joined by Scott White and Johnny Legasa. What a dynamic duo here. Obviously, we're doing this for PitchCon, the ALS Association. Get in there, donate what you can. $10, $5, $100, whatever you got. It all goes right to the ALS. We know how devastating that is. Obviously, we have one of our own, Sarah Langs, who's dealing with it. We all have love and support for her. But let's get into this. Scott White, listen, if you're here, if you're watching fantasy baseball stuff on January 26th, then you've definitely listened to the CBS Fantasy Baseball Today pod. There's just no doubt about it. And of course, so you've heard the sounds of Scott White talking through his players, hyping up his Atlanta players and everything. But if you're a big-time Scott White fan, you might have heard his NES podcast, All That Fits for 8 Bits. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Scott?
All That's Fit for 8
All That's Fit for 8 Bits. Yeah. Excuse me, I got it wrong. But it's your NES
podcast. Yes. It is an endeavor that I've sidelined for too long, frankly. It was something I started up during the pandemic.
As we all started things that we may have now moved on from during the pandemic.
Yes. But basically, I devote each episode to a classic Nintendo game.
That's great. I mean, those are evergreen episodes. So however many you have out there, people should be listening. I'm going to check it out because I grew up on NES. I still remember when we got the console, my sister and I, and we melted. It was amazing.
That's the thing. Everybody has such great memories from it, and it's just kind of an opportunity to bask in those memories and revisit those games. And it's a lot of fun. I do impressions. I sing all kinds of crazy stuff. So you should check it out if you haven't yet.
I'm a big fan of your Michael Caine impression too. So if you ever want to bust that out at any point during this episode here, feel free. Johnny Legasa.
Yo.
MLB and NFL writer, double dip in the sports. I used to do that many years ago.
It's hard.
Hats off to you. It is not easy over at The Athletic, as well as a host over at Cork Stats. How you doing, Johnny?
Thanks, man, Paul. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of yours. Scott, I'm a huge fan of yours. Really funny you're talking about NES stuff. You know, new generation. I have 2 young kids. We have the Switch. And you could download, right? They have like an app, I guess, or it's an emulator, whatever you'd call it. Technically, I'm not that good at this stuff. I'm a boomer. But my kids are playing the emulator versions of, you know, Super Nintendo and even 8-bit NES. My son, who is 4, is excellent at Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So it's really cool, right? We're playing like the Ninja Turtles platform game. So, Scott, I'm totally into it, man. I'm going to check that out because not only did I used to love it, but now I've had it kind of rekindled. You know, these playing Excite Bike with my children.
Oh, Excite Bike. Oh, my God. I can hear Excite Bike right now.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, I think we're going to get some extra listeners on All That's Fit for 8 Bits. I said it right that time. But we got to get into some pitchers, y'all, because drafts are popping off. And, you know, for me, the official start, of course, is the last second of the Super Bowl. It's baseball time. We get all the football people to come back. They've officially closed the book on their playoff fantasy or whatever they're doing with football. And baseball really kicks into that next gear. So drafts are going right now. Draft champions. Scott, I know you're running different mocks as well over at CBS. So we got to talk some pitchers. We got to put people on the right track here with our targets. So let's talk top 20. And let's start with your Scott. We're using ADP for draft champions over at the NFBC, exclamation ADP in the chat. You can check it out. Set the date to January 1st through, I think yesterday is when we set it up. So you can do that. It probably hasn't changed much, but we're going to top 20 starter from there. I removed the relievers for y'all. I went and did the legwork. So we were just looking at starters. Give us your top 20 guy that you're going after. And by the way, I let you go first because I love this pick, obviously.
Yeah. So just let me preface this by saying all the pitchers that we're going to talk about, all the pitchers that I selected to talk about aren't necessarily my pitchers as much as just pitchers I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
But Verlander, I would say, does fit the description of one of my pitchers, specifically because even though he's the one being drafted 12th on average, he's my number one pitcher
At a baby
for 2023. And I can't remember a time I've been that far off from the consensus at the top of the SP rankings. And, you know, it's what's interesting about it to me is that I think you could make an argument for legitimately that many pitchers to be the number one guy. And so it becomes kind of this, this judgment call over what risk factors do you find the scariest. At least that's how I approach it.
I totally agree there.
Verlander's going to be 40 next year. That's obviously really old.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't worry about that so much at pitcher. Like among the things that can go wrong for a pitcher, simply getting old rates pretty low on the list to me. And the fact is, he obviously didn't look old last year. Led the majors in ERA, led the majors in WHIP, won the Cy Young, came back from Tommy John throwing just as hard as he always has. I feel like he's the most of all the pitchers you could think about drafting there. I have the fewest concerns with Verlander, even with him being 40.
I totally understand that. Obviously, I'm a big fan. I'm a Tigers fan. People know that. So I have bias toward Verlander, but he's also amazing. He's a unicorn. And so people use the 40 thing against him, but there's really no basis to that. Yeah, he's one pitch away like he was when he had the TJ, but so is everybody else. So are the 24-year-olds. And so if all you really go to is that he's 40, I just don't think you have a very strong case. John, how do you feel about JB before we get into your pick in the top 20?
Well, I mean, I think he's awesome, but I think that you guys are making the most important point is we're not very good at predicting injuries, and fantasy baseball, at least redraft leagues, are 1-year contracts.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if Verlander has 31 starts, 64 starts, 52 and a half starts left in the arm. Nobody knows that. Take the inputs, which were very good. He did everything that he always does. And if anything, guys, this may be weird in this new age, like of kind of babying guys. I'm less worried about Verlander, a guy that's going to say, dude, just go get it. They just go get it. You think they care if he goes 185 or 91? Nobody cares.
No shot.
Especially if it's for a ring. New York right now, that they are, the Mets are blood hungry.
Yes, they are.
Real. It is legit. Like when they're bringing in bench players that would be starting on half the teams, they mean business. So for me, yes, all wheels up for Verlander. He was awesome. I don't think there's any question. But I'm glad this is something for myself also, not to bring up football, but we just saw it. Christian McCaffrey, the guy who couldn't stay healthy, stayed healthy. I'm trying to be more injury agnostic.
Exactly.
I think it's a plus EV move, especially when you're getting a discount. I think that's important. Scott saying he has him as his number one. He's not going to take him in the first round,
nope.
Right? He's going to take him in the second or third round. And for me, that's how you do it. So I'm all about it. Yeah. If you believe in it, yeah.
Completely agree there, and I've been beating the drum on the podcast to stop more so to stop with the idea of a safe pitcher, because I think that that's a bit of a myth too, because again, everyone's one pitch away. I know it's a cliche, I know it sounds trite, but it's the absolute truth. And thus somebody that is as good as Verlander, I'm not just going to run scared of health and go take somebody I don't like as much because he's 40. So let's run to the other.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
There was a time Zach Wheeler couldn't stay healthy. There was a time Marcus Stroman was guaranteed for 200 innings. Well, guess what? At one point in time, those two things completely inverted. And if you were married to both of those narratives, you lost on both ends, not trusting inputs over outputs. I love you guys. You guys are so good at this stuff.
I love it. Now let's run to the other end of the age spectrum here, because you do have a young buck for us in the top 20, another guy I like. So I'd be fine with either of these guys. Give us your guy in the top 20, Johnny.
Man, give me Sugar Shane McClanahan. He is like, gosh, again, if I'm going to be, he had a little bit of injury, although I would say to get to my end point first, if you're worried about injury with McClanahan, I would not be. He threw his very best fastball of the year in the last regular season game, and then went out, pumped 99 in the playoffs when 7 innings gave up 2. So if a guy, again, to the being agnostic for injuries, if a pitcher finishes strong, right? I'm not saying, well, a guy that's hurt right now is not hurt. That's different.
Exactly.
Pitchers that are healthy with their best stuff, I'm going to assume that they're going to give up me 30 starts. So that's it to McClanahan. It's like this guy's built in a freaking lab. What could you ask for? 562 OPS, 282 Sierra, 30K to 6% walk, 35 O swing, sub 80 Z-Con, 50 ground ball, and 1 home run per 9. It's just everything you could ask for across every statistical basket, right? He's suppressing contact and keeping it down, but also getting swings and misses, plus strikeouts, and he goes distance. You guys know I'm into like quality starts are flawed. I've beaten the drum for this. I'm not going to get into that again. But I like to look at money starts, 7 innings minimum, 2 earned runs maximum, right? That's a pretty easy thing to remember.
That's
a nice little standard. That's my money start. Well, you got 8 of those in 28 games. So you're also getting distance and, determinative separation. And I think that's what Scott was going to. I don't know if Verlander's won or McClanahan's won, but I'm no longer going to not take my SP1. And that's the mistake I've made. And it's weird. I don't mean me. We make these very strong and compelling arguments. And then I find sometimes I get trigger shy. You know what I mean? I get gun shy.
You just follow the
sometimes.
ADP and you just take the guy that you're supposed to.
Yep. I'm pushing McClanahan forward. You don't have to take him that early. I may even jump him around because I think he reeks of ace, like true fantasy ace.
I fully agree there. And one of the things is people come up and get worried about Tampa Bay. And I understand that generally because they have definitely played games with guys. If you're a Drew Rasmussen guy, you know how that goes. But then look at what they did with Jeffrey Springs, by the way. They really trusted him out of the bullpen. When they have somebody they feel like they can trust, they will push them. They have had ace-type seasons, 200-inning type seasons. I think McClanahan is developing into that type of guy. There's a lot of heat on that second half. I think it's a bit overblown. He finished upright and excellent. Scott, how do you feel about Shane McClanahan?
So I think McClanahan is another one of those pitchers who I was referring to, who you could make the case for him to be best at the position, as hard as he throws, as many bats as he misses, as many ground balls as he gets when he's not missing bats. Those are exciting skills. Where I differ is, while I was making the case for Verlander number 1 overall, I wouldn't call myself agnostic toward injuries, particularly at this position, because injuries are so commonplace. Like I'm pretty scared of them. Now, I don't think Verlander fits into that category because apart from Tommy John surgery, he has a long track record of health, staying health and piling up innings. And so that's a point in his favor, I feel like. But McClanahan's on the opposite end of the spectrum with that, where he just got to, 160 innings last year. So not like an ace level workload. And he showed signs, even only getting up to that point, he showed signs of breaking down the stretch, missing some time with the shoulder injury, come back kind of struggling in September. Look great in the playoffs, as you said, John. But it's the accumulation that I worry about with him. It's not enough for me to drop him in my rankings, even as low as he's going here, 10th at starting pitcher. But it's reason why I put him behind somebody like Verlander and outside of my top 5 overall.
I could certainly understand not having McClanahan 1, but I really, really like what we saw from him last year. I think sometimes we put too much emphasis on the most recent aspect, the Septembers of guys, and it's been proven that Septembers don't necessarily carry over one way or the other. So bad September, good September, whatever it is, you take the data that you have and you run with it. We all seem to like McClanahan a bit, even if Scott shares a little bit more of the injury risk than John and I. Let's go and snake here and then go to the top 50 and start with Johnny on this one. You guys are singing my tune again here because I like both y'all's picks. In fact, you're on the same ball club, so I'll let people guess which of the other 2 it is after you give yours for Scott's pick. Go ahead, Johnny.
So, yeah, it's Luis Castillo in the new environment. I mean, we've always known Cincinnati, and in fact, with the new humidor stuff, Cincinnati is now Coors 2.0.
Yes.
So you really want to avoid it like the plague. Going to Seattle, which kind of, plays up the pitchers. Castillo now, here we go, with me having to take an L for not being injury agnostic. Castillo to start the year, if you remember, he had like a shoulder thing, but they said it was no big deal. They said it was no big deal. He was going to be on track, just a little bit behind. Of course, I let it scare me off, one of my favorite pitchers in the league, and we saw that, right? So he came out, he was a bit sluggish, only throwing 95 in the 4-seamer. The first 20 innings pitched, he gave up 10 earned runs, and then, when he got his spring training in regular season, he starts pumping the 96. We got what we expected. Last 21 games, 2.78 ERA, 1.08 WHIP, and the fastball. Man, better than 11 inches of arm side run. He has a ridiculous whiff rate for a 4-seamer that he can feature. That's not something you get all the time. And I know a lot of people talk about the changeup, but it's that slider that really stuck out to me. 21% used, better than a 37% whiff. So we're talking about 3 plus pitches on a really good pitcher with a great track record who has been cutting down on the walks and improving the diagnostics. So, the four-seamer is improving from a technical level. Man, Castillo really looks awesome. He has the best probably contextual environment as far as lineup and ballpark, I think, even division in a way, Well, I guess division's weak, but the way Great American plays, it's so frustrating, right? To give up 5 to the Pirates. How did he give up 5 to the Pirates? Well, that's what that ballpark
probably
is,
that
right?
ballpark, exactly.
That's what the ballpark is. If anything gets pulled, it's gone. So I love Luis Castillo. For me, he has a chance to finish as, let's say, like a back-end SP1. I think if you told me he was overall SP 10 or 11, it wouldn't shock me at all.
I think there's a strong chance that I put a ticket on him for Cy Young when I go to Vegas for the
Wow,
main.
he could get votes, yeah.
I really believe that he could put up a Cy Young type season.
Love
Scotty,
it.
I kind of gave it away a little bit that you're going to stay with the same team. Give us your thoughts on Castillo and then jump into your teammate of his for your top 50 pick.
Yeah, so Castillo, I feel better about him than I have in a couple years because there was a stretch there with the Reds where it felt like he just wasn't able to turn the corner, and we had these kind of ace aspirations for him. The whip would be up over 1.2.
You shouldn't, though.
But he goes to Seattle. He starts working in that four-seamer more with the sinker, and still kind of figuring out, I think, how to use those two pitches with each other. But I feel like the overall ceiling has clearly improved, and pitching in Seattle rather than Cincinnati raises his floor too. So I feel pretty good about Luis Castillo. It's hard to know exactly where to slot him in the top 20 because there's a lot of alike options in there. But I'd be happy with Castillo as my number 2 or even number 1 if I'm going the budget route at starting pitcher. George Kirby, on the other hand. So again, I may have misunderstood the assignment here because it's less that I am bullish on George Kirby,
or more that you want to highlight him to discuss.
Yes.
Okay.
Then that fair. Everybody else
we will not
seems
pin these guys on you then.
Right.
We will just say that you wanted to underscore them for a reason or two. So let's hear it. Let's hear it about George Kirby because he is an interesting guy. I think some people are scared off by the youth and just, how good is he? And others are all in on like the whole trio, give Logan Gilbert a shout too. So what is it about George Kirby that made him appealing to you to want to discuss here on this panel?
So he's obviously one of the most buzzed about pitchers right now, 28th being drafted. There seems to be a strong feeling among drafters that this guy is ready to make the leap. And of course, I understand he was a huge prospect, throws a lot of strikes, does some good things. But I don't want to put the cart before the horse here because there were also some signs of trouble that he showed as a rookie, I felt like. Specifically, his pitches outside of the fastball, none of them had a very good whiff rate. It's not clear to me that he has a plus pitch apart from the fastball. And that's always a little bit scary, especially when you combine that with a 9.7 swinging strike rate overall, which is just bad. That's like some
Marco Gonzalez crap.
Yeah, it's near the bottom of the league. It was almost exactly the same as that pitcher the Orioles just acquired, whose name
Cole Irvin.
Cole Irvin. Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to be compared to Cole Irvin in really any way.
If you're supposed to be this like electric top of the rotation kind of guy, he allowed more than a hit per inning. So he showed some hitability there without a great secondary pitch to pair with that fastball. Just over a strikeout per inning, managed to keep the ERA in the low 3s in spite of that. And maybe that will continue, but like these are not traits that we normally bet on when we see them from a young pitcher. And so, part of it's just George Kirby's awesome pedigree, I think, is elevating him, but it's really the sense of optimism that I'm not sure I share with him going inside the top 30. If he was going 42nd, it'd be different. But
the market has pushed him up. He is the 28th starter off the board, and he's a top 100 pick. So if you do share those concerns, I understand that it's that control base with the big fastball that I think that draw people to Kirby. But you're right about the lack of a swing and miss offering right now. If you're betting on the come with one of the secondary pitches stepping up and jumping him into a double-digit swing strike rate, that's one thing. But right now, there are some things to have some concerns about. I do love that foundation of an elite fastball, though. That definitely something that stands out to me. John, how do you feel about Kirby?
I mean, I think you're getting a really solid pitcher, but for the profile and my worry about the floor for strikeouts, the price feels like a bit of a premium. Again, I think the context is good. I think he's going to be good, but I do worry about the strikeouts up top in particular. If you're going to pay a premium, there are pitchers in that range where you could maybe get better strikeout quality. Again, like Scott said, I know, Paul, I've been listening to for years, and it's just back of the napkin stuff. But if you're doubling swinging strike, it's going to be hard to repeat that 25. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? And we know it's not a rule.
No, but it's a good guideline. You double the swinging strike rate.
He'd probably admit that.
You double your swinging strike rate for an expected strikeout rate. It's just kind of the easy way to get an idea. And at 9.7, like Scotty said, that's Cole Irvin stuff, and he's finesse guy all the way. So I get it. I do like him. I am betting on the come a little bit. As Cubby Noel mentioned in the chat, I did take him in a DC already as my number 2. I loaded up after that. I think I'm in 3 drafts right now, so I don't know exactly who my ace is in that draft. I want to say it's somebody quite good. It is Corbin Burns. Yeah, I thought that's who it was, but I wasn't 100% sure. I had Burns and Devin Williams to start, and hopefully Williams's strikeouts as a reliever will help soften the blow of George Kirby there. But I definitely understand the concerns. I don't look at that and say, no, there's no reason to have any issues with him. I really do like him. Since we did the other 2, I know he's not on the list for anybody, but how do we feel about Logan Gilbert? Scotty, what do you think about Logan Gilbert, the third of this Seattle trio here?
I feel better about Gilbert than I do about Kirby. I mean, it's
but they're similar, aren't they? In some ways, like the control base.
Yes.
I think Gilbert's a bit further along. I think that's definitely fair to say you like him more, but I do think that they have a similar control-based, fastball-based foundation.
Yes, they do. Gilbert, especially the deeper that the year went on, he started to pick up with the whiffs.
Mm-hmm.
Like there appears to be a quality breaking ball in there.
Yeah.
And
he's got that dog in him too.
Yeah. So I'm not as concerned about him. I'm happy to pass over George Kirby to take Logan Gilbert instead. In fact, I personally rank Gilbert ahead. So I'm not especially high or low on him. I would say I'm probably right about where everyone else is on Logan Gilbert.
That's fair. Johnny, what about you with Gilbert before we move on to our next top 50 picks?
Yeah, I think I agree where I stand on Gilbert. One thing I know I had tweeted about, I just brought it up. He really had a really rough draw. And I know, scheduling, you can't game log hunt necessarily, but he really did have a tough draw. Check it out. 8 of 32. So that's roughly 25% right in the nose. Mm-hmm. Toronto, Houston, or the Yankees. That's a rough spin for 8 starts,
especially when only one of those is in division, and we had the unbalanced schedule last year.
He had a really tough draw, and he comes out of a 32 start season with a 3.2, 118, 310 xWOBA, looking really good, sub-4 Sierra. But again, I think considering the competition, right? We don't really give competition grades. Maybe that's an idea for somebody. But if we were, that's a gauntlet, man. Come on, 8.
It is as a way to assess the previous season. It wouldn't be much that you could spin forward because we don't know how the schedule would break the following year. But just to say, hey, this ERA has this context to it because he ran through the AL Central 10 times versus somebody who was facing both Easts or something. But anyway,
I know I was benching him all season. I know because I drafted
him.
And
he kept standing tall against those teams too. Logan Gilbert did a lot of good. And do you also have him ahead of Kirby the way Scott does? Okay, I do. I think all 3 of us do. Yeah. Okay, so sticking with the top 50 pick, sticking with Scott here. This is one of your team's players, another elder statesman. Is this a positive or a negative on Charlie Morton here?
So this is a positive for me. The fact where he's going 48th among pitchers. Yeah, when last year I was making the case he should be top 15. And I think he still could be top 15. I understand, disappointing season, 4.34 ERA. He's 39 years old. So people are, again, with the old pitchers, people are going to be quick to write him off just based on that. But the reason for his 4.34 ERA doesn't look to me like skills decline the way you'd expect from a 39-year-old. He still had 205 strikeouts, ninth most in the majors. His ratios were, for the most part, very similar to the awesome 2021 season he had, with one exception, and that's home runs. He gave up in a year when home runs were down across the league. Charlie Morton skyrocketed for some reason. He gave him 28 of them, 10 more than he's ever given up before. And it was
a
also
heavy ground ball guy too.
Right. He went from being a consistent ground ball guy to a fly ball guy for the first time in his career. The batted ball profile changed for him in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense, because he relies so much on a curveball, and like he was still spinning that at 3,000 RPM. I mean, he didn't lose any stuff on the curveball either. I just don't. I wonder if he wasn't burying it the way he usually does, or if his.
I think there was game-to-game inconsistency. He reminds me of a less volatile Barrios. Obviously, Barrios had some major downs, but we saw that with Morton at times too, where inning to inning things could kind of fall apart, but then he'd snap right back and pop off 3 more great innings and kind of salvage the start. And so it was hard to ever really get away from him. And as I was talking about him on the pod or writing about him, I was like, there's still a lot to like here with Morton. I would not run completely away here. And as such, I'm not going to run away here in 2023. I do think Morton is still somebody to get, because with the age and a bit of a fall off last year, the price has come down quite a bit, as you highlight.
Yeah, it has. I mean, he's being drafted in a way that would suggest he's just done, and that's not my impression at all. Like you, I stuck with him all of last year as well, because I was seeing the same things, but and it didn't pay off. But my ultimate hope is that, you know, he's had an off season to sit down and look at it and maybe smooth out his delivery. Whatever small thing was causing these inconsistencies and that led to these home runs, I think it's something he can correct, and I think he will correct it, because I think the stuff is still really good. And if it does happen, you're going to get a huge bargain this year.
I believe that
going
too.
Around 50th.
Johnny, what do you think about Charlie Morton?
Yeah, I don't know if I have the why, but I do think I have the what, because I've been working on some pretty granular rankings that'll be out in a little while, whatever.
Okay.
So Charlie Morton, and again, when I'm trying to figure these things out, in particular, kind of, right, we get into that conversation about pitchers controlling of contact and power suppression, and I believe, at least to a certain extent, it's a function of control. Sure. But I've kind of taken, and Paul, you and I have had this discussion off air, where I've been trying to get into the fastball diagnostics, talking to like Jeff Ponce and people much smarter than I, Barton Smith, just trying to understand a little bit more of the physics of the flight. And so there is a what, like I'm saying. So Morton lost more than 3 inches of arm side run on the fastball. And the subsequent effect was the home runs, because all the home runs were on the fastball.
Yeah.
So if we were just talking about that in particular, like I'd say that the reason for the jump, and you see it just across all the contact metrics, though the whiff rate dropped, it didn't drop precipitously, although 3 off 23 is pretty decent. The X stats and all the power stats really, really popped, because again, going from 13 inches of arm side run, which is excellent, going down to 10 on its own is not terrible. However, Charlie Morton is known for an extremely steep fastball, right? A very steep attack angle. It's like over 17. This is quite literally, I'd say, among starters. Again, people be careful with Savant. They use relievers. Relievers ruin all of the individual pitch metric stuff, because they can go out and go max effort. I'm serious. You got to be very careful. You're right. You have to be very careful amalgamating pitch movement stuff, starters and relievers. I mine it, scrape it, and separate it. And this is where honestly, it's been a huge help for me. So Morton, the horizontal run is still good, though degraded, but not enough to carry that V move. It's as bad as it gets. You'd be hard pressed to find another professional fastball that has 18 inches of vertical movement. At that point, it's a sinker. Normally, everybody, that's when they pull the plug on the four seam and tell you to throw a sinker. Right, because it moves too much on its own. So it was already moving down too much, right? Steep in, steep out, right? That's the right opposite equal and opposite reactions, everybody. So if your fastball comes in too steep, it's easier to connect squarely and send it out, right? So that's the idea of sinker balls that give up home runs if they're met on that plane with an adjusted swing path.
That makes sense.
So this is some of the ball path stuff that I'm into. It's so nerdy, but it does kind of help for fantasy. It does help a little bit for fantasy, but
is it correctable? That's what
I don't know, because he has always had, okay, if I had to say, I don't know if it will, but we can say that it can, because he had this problem before, and it also has led to home runs in the past. So,
exactly. So I think it could be, and that's why your point about Scott sitting down, assessing the video, looking at the data, and seeing what's there. I think Morton could fix it. And so that's why I'm willing to buy at this price, because I do think a lot of the inherent risk is covered in the price. And I'm not going to double count things against guys and say, well, I don't like him because of this. Well, the price has dropped to cover those issues on Morton. Let's get to your second top 50 guy, John, because this guy might've gotten some bad news recently with the park move. We don't know what it is though yet. Exactly, because we don't know the wall heights in Toronto. And so that could totally mitigate some of these some of the fences moving in. But talk to us about Alek Manoah and why you like him.
Although, to the park quickly, my white knight with his flowing hair, Derek Hardy, did come to the rescue and say, don't really overreact. In fact, and shame on me for trying to use intuition too much, because I assumed fence in, greater than sign, wall height, like not even, obviously if it's the green monster, but I didn't really think like, oh, a marginal kind of adjustment of wall height would negate a wall coming in. So again, I don't know. I go to people much smarter than me, like Derek. He's like orders of magnitude smarter than I am. All right, let's get to Alek Manoah. Again, one, the build, the durability. So I kind of mentioned the guys that I like up top, right? These are my guys. McClanahan, Castillo. I'm looking for strikeouts. I'm aggressively targeting strikeouts. The hope being, in case Manoah doesn't get back to like a 27, 28% K rate, 22, 23 is the floor, and the guy's going to get you max inning, right? Whatever the max is, 185, 190. The guy is just built like an absolute, brick S house, man.
Also 21 got quality that dog starts. In him.
He had Big 9 money starts also again. To me, that means everything, because it's not just can the pitcher get there. It's, does the club allow this?
Exactly.
Right? So it's not just like a will thing, right? It's not tennis or golf here. There are other people at play. So Toronto lets him go get it. 9 money starts. Love that. I don't know. Projection system's not buying the whip. We're at over 300 innings of a 101 whip. Again, he shaved an inch off the fastball move, and a little bit more when you shave your fastball. It's less steep, right? So let's call it flattening. You want to throw it higher in the zone, because it's a deceptive element, right?
It's that rising fastball,
right? They don't rise; they just
they don't rise. They drop
field, right?
Slow.
But where it does come into play, and this is from talking to pitching coaches and stuff. Even Katz was talking to me about this. When you throw the rising fastball up, you're creating a larger physical distance between the bat handle. Like it's physically harder to hit. So it's harder to read and then harder to hit. And in a game of, milliseconds or whatever, quadrilliseconds, whatever I'm talking about, that's a huge difference. So Manoah shaved the fastball, started throwing it up. Yes, the strikeouts went down, but the infield fly rate went through the roof.
And those are basically strikeouts in terms of outs. They're automatic.
I did a really detailed video on this. You get on my Patreon, but it's free. Sometimes these arguments for me take this kind of really granular, and I'm just into it. The only thing that popped from Manoah that I noticed, all the diagnostics were good, all the velo was good, everything is good. He just had a lot of balls fouled off around the edges. His O contact spiked. That's the least sticky thing and the least thing that we're worried about. Like, again, give me the inputs, the velo, the movement, the dog is there. You tell me guys fouled off his off-speed stuff, which is excellent, mind you. It's really good. The slider, 346 X-Lug, 32% whiff rate. And like I said, even with the contact up, the X-Wob on the year was 275. So this isn't like, oh man, he's starting to get beat around the yard. This is pure domination from a very late spot. And he's in a wealth of pitchers. He's in like this pocket that I'm really digging, where I've been passing up top, and if I don't get McClanahan, for me, it's not like Manoah, Castillo, Gallen, Javier. There's this lovely kind of pocket, and I think, Paul, if I don't get a McClanahan, I want 2 from that group. But, and again, all the context, I know the division can be tough, but the balanced schedule will help. And Toronto is awesome. Toronto is awesome, man. That, you can't really ask for a better context, and they beefed up the bullpen. Like, he's a pop. 7 innings, 8 Ks, and a win every time out. So that's what I want, especially at the price.
There's going to be an ace season from Manoah. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be, but I want to be there. He's one of these guys.
He was 3rd in AL Cy Young voting this past year.
So. Wait, he was just an ace
season. Exactly. That's true. I guess he had an ace season. Yeah, right. He's fantastic. Go ahead, Scott.
No, but that goes to show you just how much he's being undervalued in drafts right now. He is one of the pitchers who I have him in my top 15, and he's going outside the top 20 here. John does as well, apparently. And, you know, I don't know that he can do a 2.24 ERA again, but like, I think people are in the habit of fixating on strikeout rate, and you see that 8.2 K per nine, and it's like, it doesn't look ace-like. But, you know, strikeouts dropped across the league over the past year. It's a trend that we hadn't seen reversed in decades. And, you know, part of it, I think, is just pitchers realizing that with the juice ball gone, they don't have to try for strikeouts.
Exactly. They can pitch in the zone a little bit more.
Yeah.
And volume can counterbalance that. This is a big thing with Sandy Alcantara, of course. A lot of concerns about his strikeout, or people are trying out the same arguments from last year. Get some new arguments, folks. That one was lame last year. It didn't work, and he won the Cy Young. Same exact argument, though. And volume can counterbalance that. It reminds me of Ace Wainwright and Carpenter back in the day. They didn't have big strikeout rates, but they would go the big 200+ innings, and their volume of strikeouts would get there. Because at the end of the day, I understand strikeout rate's important. I'm big on it as well. But the volume of Ks that you get is what really matters. And so I totally agree with that. It's funny you mentioned that foul ball thing, Johnny. A guy we talked about earlier had that issue early in his career, Justin Verlander. It used to be the most nauseating thing early in his career before he really turned into an ace. He would give up 20 fouls a game. It would run his count up. Eventually, they would doink some garbage over the second baseman's head for a base hit. It would spiral. He would try to overpower the next guy, 3-run homer, and I'm going to bed. It was so frustrating. And then, of course, he became an ace, and now he's a walk-in Hall of Famer. Anyway, we got to keep it moving here, so we're going to continue on to our next guys here. We are moving into the 51 to 100 range amongst starters here, and we're going to stick with Johnny on this one. You're going a little bit of a veteran who, when he opted out of the qualifying offer, I was like, oh, no, baby, what is you doing? And it turns out Tyler Anderson knew what he was doing because he had a deal in hand with the other LA team. I know they're in Anaheim. I don't care, LA people, shut up. But it's the Angels. Tyler Anderson. Talk to us about Tyler Anderson, what you like about him going over to the other LA squad.
Yeah, I mean, this is Scott. This is your type of vanilla right here, right? This is right up your alley. No, especially if you bulked up on strikeouts, this is the kind of safety blanket again that I think you can get max complement of innings with very strong ratios. 2.57 ERA, 1 WHIP last year, 6.17 OPS, really, really good. The thing that I'm buying, right, is again across the baskets. He's very strong. Low walk rate, 5% walk, 28 hard hit, 3/4 of a home run per 9. So we want to keep the ball in the yard. More importantly to me was, you know, he went into the Dodgers organization and you come out better than you were before. So they retooled this changeup is a completely different pitch. I mean, he added something like 7 inches of drop with 2 inches of arm side run, made it his primary pitch against righties, and he pitched it to a 274 X-Lug with a 37% whiff rate. So that's pretty much my it on Tyler Anderson is, and we'll also know right away if he stinks, right?
Yeah.
He's cheap. If he gets destroyed, I'm not like clinging on to him.
And you don't have to.
I do think he's going to be good. So
do you think
the off-speed stuff's really good? I think, you know.
Do you think that he's stayed in that area because if he screws up, he can just dart over and talk to Mark Pryor in person and get another quick lesson?
You'll fix him again. I mean, you know what's funny? We're going to be wondering that. Like, I wonder if the Dodgers are going to be reticent about like fixing guys that they have for the short term because it's almost like fixing a bad girlfriend for the guys after. You know,
stop! No, we're not getting into any of that.
But,
no.
So anyway, so the thing with Anderson is really just that is. I hear people quote usage all the time, which I think is really important as we understand granular application of arsenals. However, some pitchers now, I brought up this at the Athletic, I call it the targeted approach, but the idea being a lot of pitchers now have 2 separate attack plans. And when you have a pitch that you only throw to a certain handed hitter, it can really skew that overall number where you might look past it, or some people I've noticed overreact to it. He stopped throwing the changeup. Well, if Tyler Anderson is facing a lefty-handed lineup, don't expect the changeup. He doesn't throw it to them. So there is sometimes a little bit of context to these arsenals that I've been really digging because if you don't look at that, you'd never know, right? So there's always just a little bit more, right? Peeling away the onion layers.
No, I hear that. Scott, Johnny mentioned that Tyler Anderson's your kind of vanilla, which sounded like a diss, but I think it was a compliment. Do you like Tyler Anderson?
I like drafting Tyler Anderson.
Johnny, you're muted. You're muted.
Hold on, slow churn vanilla, soft serve vanilla, vanilla bean.
There's lots of great vanilla. No, like I said it sounded like an insult, but it was a compliment. I
vanilla
said
Vic,
that.
Vanilla Ice.
Vanilla Vic. That's a good.
I just can't remember a time that a pitcher who had 15 wins, a 2.57 ERA, and even 1 WHIP is going like pick 225.
People,
I mean, I
people think
know
he's going to forget everything he learned with the Dodgers.
yeah. Well, I mean, he's not going to win 15 games probably with the
Sure.
Angels like he did with the Dodgers. I understand. And you know, they're looking at the even 7K per nine and probably not thrilled with that either. But it's just like it's a no risk move where you're drafting him. And
Exactly.
in fact, I
It's
do a
how
lot
you
of
build
12.
a rotation too.
I know the industry consensus is, you know, they're kind of going behind the 15 team league now. I do a lot of 12 team drafts though. And a couple of those I've gotten Tyler Anderson as my very last pick, just the last guy to round out my pitching staff.
I believe it.
Like,
that's a great, and worst case is, like Johnny said, he blows up early. You're no worse. I mean, you're a little worse for the wear if you take a few bad starts, but then you move on, you stream it, and in a 12-teamer, you're going to have players that you can get, take care of that, and move on. But Upshot is something pretty solid again this year, I would say. Now you're going to highlight an injured guy that people probably have a lot of questions about, Scotty. So talk to us about Chris Sale and what your expectations are for him this year, because he is cheap, but there is a big reason for that.
Well, my expectation is he's not going to be injured anymore.
That would be wonderful. That's a great start right there for my body comp.
In fact, when he wasn't injured going into last year, we were all pretty excited about drafting him.
He was going pretty high.
He had come back from Tommy John, made 9 starts in 2021, had a 3.16 ERA, more or less looked like Chris Sale again. Command was a little off, but that's typical coming off Tommy John surgery. But then he had the fractured rib cage, or the stress fracture in his rib cage in spring training, and then he comes back for 2 starts, fractures his wrist, missed the rest of the season. It was just a lost season, and so you're looking at his career numbers, and like he hasn't pitched anywhere close to a full season since 2019. 2019 was a very long time ago. It was a different world.
It really was.
And that's the last time we saw it. And he wasn't even that good in 2019 because he came to find out he needed Tommy John surgery.
Yeah, and so he was a home run machine that kind of boosted his ERA, even though the WHIP and the component numbers were still there for Sale. So you like him to be healthy, and he's the 51st pitcher. After pick 150, you're buying some shares.
Oh, for sure, and like I think the ADP is just fatigue. Yes. Like we tried this last year. It didn't go right. I'm over it. I haven't seen ace Chris Sale since 2018, but there's 2 fluke injuries last year, nothing that should impact his performance going forward. And his track record, it's kind of a similar spot where we were with Justin Verlander at this time last year, who also it had been a couple years since we saw him pitch, but the track record is so consistent and so dominant that it's a point where it's no risk, I feel like, for Sale.
Yeah, I think one of your best points there is the price and the fluke injuries too. Like, these were not re-injuring the arm. It wasn't an elbow and a shoulder. It was some fluke stuff. So he can get back. Chris Sale can still have some major upside. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he completely popped off. Now we do have 4 guys left. We got to be a little quick here because I have a little bit of an earlier out than most of the shows here. We're going to be out at the 10, at 50 here. So let's stick with Scott, another 50 to 100 pick. I like this guy because the Humidor has really made their park a pitcher's park. Talk to us about Merrill Kelly coming off his breakout. Do you think he can sustain it, or are you fading him, Scott?
So I just think he's an interesting case, like a litmus test for the extent that the pitching environment may or may not have changed. How much you believe in that, I guess. Because, Merrill Kelly was awesome last year. He was the 32nd best starting pitcher, 13 wins, 3.34 ERA, went 200 innings. But he's wasn't any more of a bat misser than we've seen from him in the past. The walk rate was pretty much the same. Basically, everything was the same for Merrill Kelly, except the home runs. The home run rate went down. Seemed like, in line with the league as a whole, with the juice ball going away and all of that. And then what makes him, I think, an even clearer litmus test of this is what happened to him in September, because September was the best month for home runs. He allowed himself 11 of his 21 home runs on the season in September. Prior to September, his ERA was down at 2.97.
So he's our guidepost of where the ball is.
Exactly. Merrill Kelly seems like the guy who tells us how the league looks as a whole, and his performance shifts the most drastically because of it. You see this from other pitchers too, Miles Mikolas and Martin Perez. That whole class of pitchers who were all very valuable last year, but I mean, you could put Tyler Anderson in that class.
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Nobody's drafting them like that again. Which leads me to believe they could actually be values. If their improvement was just these pitchers are going to be good now because the ball plays this way now, then people are too quick to write them off based on their old standards for what a good pitcher should be.
No, I think that's completely fair. And that's really interesting about the 11 homers in September for Merrill Kelly, half of his season total. Johnny, you're sticking in the NL. You're sticking in the NL West. Another injured guy, but when he stays healthy, Alex Cobb is still good. Remember last year he had that crazy FIP ERA split. The defense was letting him down so much with the Giants. Talk to us about Alex Cobb and what we can expect this year if we can find some health with him.
Yeah, I can even do them both really quick, right? So Alex Cobb is the first one you mentioned. I think that it's really unlucky. I hate to just say that because it feels kind of like cheesy.
But it was the truth.
I have that ball that Darren Ruff kicked after the trade, like emblazoned on my brain. I can't believe that there's a scorer out there that called that a hit. That's like
real.
That was malpractice, scoring malpractice. It was really it was shameful. But all right, Alex Cobb, it's pretty easy, you know. Sub 3 FIP, 315 Sierra, 62 ground ball, half a home run per 9, and he added 2 miles to everything across the arsenal in San Fran. He's really been good. They've also gotten the best split finger out of him, 43% use, 304 xlog, 30% whiff rate. So going back where he's going, you actually have a chance at some strikeouts as well, right? So I don't mind leaning on some of the vanilla ice cream, but I want some moose tracks too, and I think Alex Cobb gives you a chance. He does give you a chance at some fillers, you know. So, and my other guy, because again, you know, everybody, please, you shouldn't, don't death grip these guys. You know,
I like this guy too.
Right? You do a little bit of analysis and you hold on to it. If it works, it works. Now, the second one, I might want to hold on a little bit more because I think we've seen some development. So it's Kyle. We got to go Horse Bradish, right? So Horse Bradish, he was awesome. This guy straight up dominated the minors, and I know that. And 250 will get you in the bus here. The bus costs 250, by the way. But 28 innings, 1.3 ERA, 0.6 WHIP, a 28% K minus walk, right? Not K rate. 28% K minus walk to go with 1/3 of a home run per 9. I mean, this guy was lights out. So when people do really jump off the page, I circle them not for immediate dominance, but guys that listen. Not everybody can do
tabs.
That. Not everybody has that like in their singular game set. And then he came up. He had a really tough schedule: 14 of 23 games against Toronto, Boston, the Yankees, and Houston. He's another guy. His fastball was not good. But when he came back in September, they added a new pitch, a sinker, to counterbalance the fastball, which was just awful. 591 xlog, 11 home runs on the fastball. When he started throwing the sinker, 53% ground ball, sub 300 xlog on the sinker. So he made an almost 1-for-1 replacement fastball to sinker, and it kind of erased the problems. He had 4 money starts, 7 innings minimum, 2 earned run maximum, 4 in the last 8 games, 2 of them against Houston, 1 of them against Boston, the last against Cleveland, that went to the playoffs. So, again, temper expectations. But this is, I think Bradish might be like my breakout pick. Like, this is the guy that I think could be the SP2 that we're all looking for, you know, like that kind of thing. Those are starts that, again, not everyone will get you, man. That is I know I tweeted it. It was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. But he had a higher money start percentage than Jacob deGrom. And like, I mean, listen, that is legit, no joke. Those starts are not easy to come by. When you add that parameter to starting pitchers, you'd be surprised how many of them kind of wither. It's not a regular occurrence. So it's
hard to get that third time through. Like we talk about third time through all the time. Man. It's a big deal. I will say, I like Bradish. I'm going back to the well. But after the 8 2/3, 2 hits, shutout innings, 10 Ks against Houston, he laid a dud at Boston.
Yeah, come on. So
yeah, we are, because it ruined me. Okay, between him and
9
Kyle,
walks the last 2 starts after that 0 walk game and 8.2
between
innings.
him and his new teammate
Kyle Gibson, spicy, bro. What do you want?
Ruined my season in the main event. I could have finished second. I could have been.
Kyle Bradish has too bad of a fastball. I think it's actually part of the reason. It's like Corbin Burns when he first came up.
He had to switch.
The slight cut action.
That's right.
And what's funny is that it's beautiful. Like, it looks so nice. It's so pretty. It's so like, here you go on a platter. It's a fastball.
As it's
But then you
sailing out of the
realize the
yard, it
batters
looks
are
so
getting that
beautiful.
easier too. You don't want slight dip on your four seamer. You're trying to miss the bat above, and dropping is not good
I agree.
unless you're
Okay,
dropping so far. So
there is one more. I do have to go, but I want
You
to
gotta
set
go.
Scott up for this guy because I
Okay.
love this guy. So I just want to be
All right.
clear that whether
Yeah.
you like him or not, I love your last guy. I'm a big buyer in Cleveland, guys, and I love Cody Morris. I got to get
Oh!
going, guys. I'm sorry to leave early,
I
but
got
thank
it.
you so
Don't
much.
worry.
Nick's going to take care of it.
I'm-
I'm still going to be doing plenty of things here on PitchCon, so you're not getting rid of this mug or this garbage mustache anytime soon. Scott, take it away. I'll catch you guys later.
I'll just go like this, guys. Hold my mustache for
Bye.
score. Okay.
All right. Cody Morris here.
Yes.
All right. So one of the guys we didn't talk about in this pitcher segment, this guy right here, Spencer Strider.
Right.
If I have to make an argument for who is 2023's Spencer Strider, okay, nobody's going to be 2023 Spencer Strider. But if I had to make an argument for somebody to be, I think Cody Morris might be my pick because, like Strider, there's some relief risk there, mostly because durability issues for Cody Morris. But when he was able to pitch the last 2 years in the minors, only 82 and a third innings, but when he was able to pitch, 164 ERA, 0.92 whip, 14.4 K per nine in the minors. And when he got called up late in the year, pitched for the Guardians in the majors, they kind of were having him rehab, coming back from another injury at the major league level. So they were giving him starts, but they were short starts for the most part. Eventually got up to 5-6 innings for a couple turns. But during that time, he had a swinging strike rate of 13.9%, which would have been 8th best among qualifiers. This guy has a great changeup. He knows how to miss bats. He was a consistent success in the minors. But because those durability issues were so stark, Cody Morris has kind of gotten passed over from as a prospect. Guardians organization, they have a way of elevating pitching talent. I don't know. This could work out really well if he's able to stay healthy and find his way into the rotation, which, if the former happens, then the latter seems like just a matter of time.
Oh, I dig it. Cody Morris right now, obviously, he's the 6th with Cleveland. Keep in mind, Daniel Espinosa still kind of exists despite injury and stuff. But
he definitely exists.
Yeah, exists. But it's like, when are we going to see that? I hope we see it soon. But it does seem like if there's something that would happen to, say, Zach Plesac or Aaron Savali again, which has happened to both of them, Cody Morris would be the one to step in right now, especially with Eli Morgan doing well inside the bullpen. Cody Morris does elevate four seamers actually pretty well. 13% swing strike rate on it last year. Cutter, okay. The changeup, as you mentioned, had that massive O swing, but really only threw about 70 times. One underneath that, just to make sure you guys don't say the stupid thing. I'm going to say just under 70, and lots of O swing on it. Good swing strike rate on it. There is an opportunity. It's just about, is he going to take full advantage of it? He doesn't have that overwhelming thing like Strider, but I understand what you're saying of like, hey, a guy that's relief and getting opportunity and could do well in that way. I definitely dig that one. Did you have one more guy, or was that the last one, or John?
That was
No,
it.
I thought we were all going at 10-2, so I squeezed in Bradish. But I'm curious to your. If you look at the numbers on that changeup from Morris again, I'm just looking now. Is it like a knuckle? It's like a knuckleball. The RPMs on that changeup is just ridiculous. I mean,
it could be more of a split change, right? I see 1,400 spin on that,
but a 48% whiff rate. So I mean, he's doing something right. Yeah, this
sure. It's hard to say that because again, it's just under 70 thrown, so it's hard to really extrapolate a ton on it. He threw a lot more in the middle of the plate than you want. The best changeups are the ones that have a ton of low location, right? High low lock. He had a lot of heart at the plate, just kind of getting it over, but I think he surprised some guys with it. So that's okay. But actually, I had a couple notes that I wanted to say really quickly. One, this is a question to you guys and to chat. I'm wondering, do you guys want on the player page for there to be a toggle or like a check mark for is the dog in him? And then I can assign to a guy that we collectively say there is a dog in him and have a check mark on their player page.
I mean, I'd be curious. You need to have like a whole explanation of the criteria. I think. I think that would make it better. There's an argument for that would make it worse.
Sure, I would have a tooltip. There would be a tooltip. There's a tooltip for every stat, so we would have one. If you hover over, is there a dog? Is that dog in him?
Yes, and so he checks these boxes of whatever. And
well, I mean, I don't know how we define it. How do we define it for Alek Manoah that he has that dog in him? Because he does have that dog in him. We know that.
He's had the dog in him 3 of the last 4 years, 5 of the last 7 years. He's had the dog in him. He has the dog in him on even years, generally.
Oh man. Also, John, you mentioned about pitcher handedness. I'm a huge thing of this now. The past year, really, I've really gotten into it. Dave Swan said some really smart stuff about it. Heard him earlier today, and it kind of made me really lean into it more than usual. Also, keep in mind when I was doing all this granular pitch data, when I started my journey with it, mentioned it about PitchFX's things in the dark hole of Fangraphs that no one was talking about. I was like, oh my God, we have this information. We never had the splits of lefty versus righty. Like that was just impossible to find. And it was one of the goals I had when creating the player pages we have now, that you can actually split it out and really get that granular data based on left and right.
You can't unsee it, right? You can't.
Yeah,
once you see
so
it, you can't
clear.
unsee it. Yeah.
And like, oh, this is why McClanahan is struggling in some way against lefties. He has the changeup to nullify righties now so well, but he still has the same problem he had in 2021 against left-handers, which is weird for a guy who had a 2.54 ERA. That he could get even better if he just throws more sliders and curveballs that are really good, or maybe even adds a sinker. I don't know.
Four-seamer though, his four-seamer it whistles and whiffles.
It's so good, but it gets crushed by lefties, if you can believe it. I mean, maybe you can just say it's a command problem with that, and that could be the fix. But like Aaron Ashby, I would love Aaron Ashby so much, and then I realized that his sinker is so bad against right-handers, and it's part of the reason for his struggles. Charlie Morin, did you guys mention that he had the fractured leg, and then he had a quote saying that he didn't get his extension because of the leg for about 2 months, and then he realized that, and then was pushing off harder, and that was the major change for him around June 15th or so. So maybe that's it.
That's
I don't know.
I don't suspect his numbers were that much better after June 15th.
Oh, that was when it turned on for a moment. Like I remember he had a 12 strikeout game and 4 runs, but then the next one was absurd, and that's when he had that nice stretch, and it started oh hey, Charlie Morton has arrived.
Because actually his 2021 followed a similar pattern, and so that was another reason that he kept me invested all season long. Is I know it's going to turn for him just like it did last year.
Oh, I like the old man has to get warm narratives. Those
now
he's old.
It's July though. It was May, and then it was June. Now it's going to be July. So
he's getting older.
3 months.
If you're a science guy, his natural heat, right?
Right. So by the way, I'm just spouting about I've heard all this stuff that was so good from you guys, and I'm like, oh, all of the little things. Okay, so Merrill Kelly is such an interesting idea because across the board for us, PLV and everything, he is average. I mean, the changeup had moments and stuff that was good, but it's a fastball that overperformed in my view. And that to me is a problem, and that will sometimes go well. We also know that the Arizona Diamondbacks defense was amazing last year, super exceptional. So I didn't know that before the start of the year. I'm trying to ask people who we think the best defense is in the majors, because I want to know that now, as we can probably find a really good Toby on that team. I don't know if that's going to be the case again for Arizona. If it is, I might be kind of in on Merrill Kelly if that's the case, especially in your 15 teamers for that one. And Tyler Anderson, I'm not giving him enough love. You're right. I tried to find someone that was a sub 3 ERA and that good.
Love him.
Adam Wainwright was the best one I had entering 2022 after a 305 season. We all just kind of didn't care. We had him around 200, 250 or something like that in that range.
I was drafting a lot of Adam Wainwright last year. Didn't work out.
But it's a common thing that we have these guys that have these exceptional seasons or whatever. And Marco Gonzalez had a 3 ERA or something in 2020 in those 12 starts, but still we didn't really believe that hard into it, right? Or I called the Derek Rodriguez, if you remember that. He had a blissful season.
Yes, that's right.
But you're right. I mean, John, you were mentioning the changeup that was so good, right? That should stick around. The defense won't. That was a huge positive. The defense of the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks were so much for those guys. So if they're losing, if Anderson's going to the Angels, how good do we feel about that defense? I don't know, but I think he is still getting underdrafted. And John, you made a really good point that you'll know if the changeup's still there or not, and then you can move on.
We'll know immediately. Yeah, exactly.
And that's a huge deal. That's the thing that's not talked about enough, especially with those these later targets. That those roster spots are so important. And you don't want to have Charlie Morton for 3 months.
Yeah,
you're sure if you may be good in the second half, but you just lost the first half and all the opportunities for guys in April and May. But anyway, that was
from June 15th on last year. Charlie Morton had a 3.63 ERA, which still isn't great, but it's a lot better than
what was the whip
4.34.
What was the whip?
Oh, I'd have to calculate
I want to say it's
that.
112. I don't know. That's my head. But that's fine. I'd take that with the strikeouts and the wins that he gets with that too. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm in on more because of it. I think it's too much
One-
of a I
110.
don't know what's going
110's
on
the
with
win.
it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know what we're like. It's gonna be a bad game. I'm like, is this it? I don't know for the entire season. And that's gonna drive me nuts. So I'm probably gonna be out. But man, that was so fun just to sit here and be like, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Like Scott, I've been mentioning you mentioned in the thing with CVS about Max Fried and Urias being like the same pitcher. I now have them back to back.
There you
Like
go. I don't see how you
it's sad on
separate
that
them.
one. Yeah. I mean, Alec Manoah is actually right in there too now for me. The same kind of idea in my head of like a lower strikeout expectation, but just really good ratios for a winning ball club. Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you've got it. All right. We've got the great graphics draw off now. I cannot thank you, John and Scott, for taking the time to do this. This was a blast. Sorry we went a minute over, Scott. That's on me.
No problem.
But get out of here. Thank you guys so much for being a part of PitchCon this year.